Hey guys, how's it going? So today's video topic was actually left as a comment on one of my previous videos. And Jimbula wants to know what's the difference between the Crippler and Kneecapper legendary perks, because they basically do the same thing. And I thought this was actually a really interesting question because he's totally right. They do actually do the same thing. They're both focused on crippling limbs. So if we look at the actual perk, Crippling reads 50% more limb damage. So I can only assume that this means when you're shooting at a particular body part, it essentially takes 150% of the weapon's base damage, but only towards crippling it, not actually doing the damage itself. But if we look at the Kneecapper perk, this just reads 20% chance to cripple the target's leg. So I interpret this as you can shoot any part of the body you like, but you have about a 1 in 5 chance to cripple the target's leg instantly. So the Kneecapper perk is a little bit different because it doesn't focus on how much damage you're doing to a limb, it just actually gives you a small percentage into crippling the target's leg instantly. And another difference with the Crippling perk is you have to actually shoot at the limb you want to cripple. So I think the effectiveness of each of these perks really just comes down to why you're using them. I think the Crippling perk is really good for either slowing down your enemies by shooting their legs, making them so they can't shoot back, or use melee attacks by shooting their arms, or even reducing their accuracy by crippling their head. But as for the Kneecapper perk, you're really just limited to slowing down the target and crippling their legs, basically making them immobile. Now for me personally, I use the Kneecapper perk quite a bit when up against Deathclaws or other creatures that just charge at you with melee attacks. And really all you have to do to slow them down is hip fire at their body. And you can really hit anywhere on their body, it doesn't matter where, and you have a 1 in 5 chance of crippling their leg and slowing them down. So the Kneecapper perk really shines when it's up against Deathclaws charging at you, or if it's up against enemies like Super Mutant Suiciders, where their only goal is to get close to you. But the interesting thing is, I would say overall, the Crippling perk is actually more effective in the end. And I think depending on the weapon, the Crippling perk is actually more useful than on others. So because the Crippling perk is actually focused on 50% more limb damage, you really have to look at the damage per shot of your weapon. Because realistically, the more damage you have on your weapon, you're going to actually add 50% more of that damage into just crippling that target's limb. So depending on the weapon's damage and the limb's damage threshold, you may be able to actually take out the limb in a single shot. However, that's only if you're actually aiming for that particular limb. So I would say for the Crippling perk, it helps to have a really strong weapon regardless of the rate of fire. But I would say the complete opposite about the Kneecapper perk, because it really comes down to rate of fire. I use the Kneecapper weapon solely as a utility weapon, so really the damage does not matter to me. But what it comes down to on the Kneecapper weapon is just having a higher rate of fire, because every time you shoot around it has a 20% chance to instantly cripple that target's leg. So if your gun shoots faster, you basically just have more chances in a shorter amount of time. So by discussing these, I think we've actually come to a verdict. I would say the Crippling and Kneecapper perks serve the same purpose, but go about it in two different ways. The Crippling perk relies on heavy damage and precision toward one limb, whereas the Kneecapper perk relies purely on rate of fire. Alright guys, well I think that about does it for the video, so hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like and share, it really helps with the video's performance. Also, if you have your own video suggestion, make sure you leave it down in the comments section below. And if you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.
Got a doll baby, I love her so. Nothing else like her anywhere you go. A man, she's anything but calm.